would say no, definitely not. The bucket is correlational, right? So correlational research. Experimental research is causal research. And like, I don't know if you've heard people say this, but like correlation is not causation. And it's because so many people mix up those two things and they are two very different separate buckets. Like, is cause and effect a type of relationship, generally speaking? Yes. Correlation, are these two things related? Experimental, does this thing cause this other thing? The only like nuance, like gray space I can think of is if you do a quasi-experimental study. In my experience, people will want you to use more correlational terms to report that finding, just to really underscore that you did not identify a true cause and effect, because it was a quasi-experiment, not a true experiment. And people are very stingy about the cause and effect terms. The number of times I've had to take impact out of a research paper because it was a quasi-experiment and not a true experiment, I like couldn't even count. So then the question is, couldn't you group quasi-experiment with correlational? And still, I would say no, because quasi-experimental designs they just look totally different than a correlational design. Like a quasi-experimental design, you still have to put so much work into like setting up groups, and correlational, that's not necessary. Sometimes I think of it as like a stair stepper in terms of like how much time and energy is it going to take to set this study up, and you have like descriptive and then like correlational, and then you have quasi-experimental, and then you have experimental is like the most complex setup. Not that it's a harder study, not that all research isn't hard to do, but like that is a complex setup that you need to go through. Correlational is on the easier side of that spectrum.